Good afternoon. It's Monday the 17th of December 2012. Welcome to UK Column Live. I'm your host this afternoon, Brian Gerrish, and with me in the studio is Mike Robinson.
Afternoon.
And I'd just like to say that I've selected a Christmas tie for this week as a little bit of festivity from the UK Column team. So for those of you that have been watching my ties and commenting on it, I hope it meets your approval. Weather outside is blue sky, sunshine, a little bit cold, quite a chilly southwesterly wind. The forecast by the national forecasting agencies was for some rain today, but here in Plymouth it's dry. Tomorrow we can expect it to be dry or raining or possibly overcast. We'll wait and see. So we've got some fairly heavy news today in trying to get across what's really happening in the world, and we're going to start with I think this is the Mail, which is worried that we've all been terrified because the North Koreans have been launching rockets.
Yeah, I saw this at the weekend and it did make me laugh slightly because he is spreading fear across the globe as a result of his launch of a satellite, and this is the actual article. So they're trying to paint Kim Jong-un as being a sort of 007 antagonist kind of role, and of course it's nonsense.
Yeah.
What can you say?
Well, I think the objective is quite clearly to try and hype up the fear factor amongst people, and that if we don't do as the government says, we've got all these mad people in the world who are trying to kill us. But this is a particularly childish article. It's so bad that we would encourage people to go to the Mail and actually read it for themselves.
Yeah. On the other hand,
this is a bit more serious.
Well, this is from Pravda. So Russia is to create 2 new super missiles more powerful than Satan, according to Pravda. 2 kinds of new strategic missiles. Basically, one's going to be with solid fuel motor and the other with liquid fuel motor. And the bigger one, which is the liquid-fueled intercontinental ballistic missile, will, according to Pravda, be able to beat the United States missile defences. And really this has to be seen in the context of the missile defences that are being placed in Europe and around the southwestern borders of Russia.
Yeah.
And it's a response. So, you know, NATO is putting these missile defences in Poland and Ukraine and other places in order to, they say, deal with the threat from Iran.
Yeah.
But Russia, of course, naturally sees that as a direct threat to themselves.
Yeah, so there's a stranglehold being put around Russia at the moment.
And this is Russia's reaction.
Yeah, and we're seeing NATO expanding, which is increasing this pressure the whole time.
Right, and Syria is being used, of course, to put missiles into Turkey now as well. So, so the situation is getting worse. And we have Iran also making a comment on this. So the Iranian, what was he, foreign minister or defense minister? Sorry, I've lost which one it was, but foreign minister has come out and said that the missiles in Turkey are a step towards world war, and I think I would probably echo that. There's clearly a major offensive going on in terms of NATO equipment being placed in strategic locations around the southwestern Asian perimeter, and it's got to be seen as a threat by Russia and Iran.
We've got David Cameron, of course, crowing that he's been able to get support from other European leaders for actually arming the Syrian rebels. So once again, David Cameron, British Prime Minister, leader of the Tory party, is clearly very pleased with himself because his solution to stopping the violence in Syria is to pump the arms in for the so-called rebels. Which seems to me to be suitably inflaming the situation and, of course, antagonising not only the Russians but also the Chinese.
Yeah.
And I think he knows exactly what he's doing. So it's the same sort of psychopathic behaviour that we've seen in Tony Blair and Gordon Brown, of course, just followed through into the Conservative Party.
Absolutely.
And mentioning David, here he is. And this is quite an incredible story for me because I always look at this at the against the backdrop of the trouble that we've got in Europe at the moment as a result of the European Union.
Well, I read this and I just thought the man is admitting treason. isn't he?
Oh, well, I wouldn't disagree with that at all.
So plans. This is an EU deal towards creating a European army, which Britain, of course, will take part in. And with our 50-year defence pact with France, we're well on our way. And this probably goes a long way to explaining why the British Army is being decimated at the moment in terms of its employment. Rates.
People sent, yes. Numbers reduce,
yes.
Drastic reduction, and send people, abnormally large numbers of people to disappear at Christmas time, and we've got the integration of the command and control structures going on at the moment. So slowly but surely the armed forces are gradually being interwoven with the European services.
So they're talking about more systematic and longer-term European defence cooperation, including pooling and sharing of military capabilities. And this is, along with the banking sector, this has got to be seen as federalised European policy, doesn't it?
It is, but it's this one here where they're talking about the fact that basically EU countries have got to consult before they make their own decisions on defence. It's a bit like we're being told over money. You can't move as a nation state. You've actually got to consult with the European Union. So we have Europe, which of course is in chaos. We have the Euro, which is in chaos. We have nation states breaking down. And what is David Cameron doing? He's insisting that we get even closer to this corrupt, tyrannical organisation. And Mike, you've just described it as treason, and I think that's what we're very happy to do, is describe this as treason by the British Prime Minister.
Yeah.
So we'll watch that with interest. At home, we've got the Mail picking up here on social workers doing their worst again, and this is an incredible story of a lady losing her children.
Well, we've been talking about many similar stories for quite a number of years now. This is and it's pleasing to see a story like this in the mainstream press. But of course, this isn't just one example. We've got how many examples of this kind of thing?
Hundreds.
Hundreds. So this lady had her children taken away from her in a dawn raid, the type of police operation you would expect for drug dealers or murderers or something, and so they're coming along, taking her children after she was wrongly accused of cruelty. And it seems that in many of these cases there is no due diligence by the police done. It is the accepted word of social services, and they go in and break the door down. Well,
we've been told on numerous occasions by police who are prepared to talk that essentially they have to do as social services say, and this is what makes the thing so dangerous, that we have public servants who are hidden in local councils. They're not even accountable to democratically elected councillors. If they're involved in child services, that whole part of the council is secret, and then they can effectively commission the police to come and steal people's children. So the overall picture that we're constantly reporting on is the fact that the state is now starting to show itself as an emerging dictatorship. And of course, if you can't protect your children or other family members, we're rapidly heading towards dire straits. So if you want to do something about this, it's first of all know what's going on, and then, for goodness sake, talk to friends and family and spread the word, because it's the exposure that stops it.
Now, there were two key points in this particular article that I wanted to raise with you, Brian, and one was that the judge, Nicholas Marston, said that social services who accused the parents of deliberately causing symptoms of illness in their disabled son acted on claims based on misunderstandings or were just plain wrong. And of course, the experience that we have is that social services lie, in fact. So to say that it was just plain wrong actually isn't expressing the truth of the matter.
Well, we have personal experience of being in a court case where, of course, when perjury was exposed, the lady judge present at the time simply dismissed it as a mistake by social services. So if social services commit perjury, they produce false reports, false witness statements, they essentially lie, that's a mistake. But of course, if it's anything on the parent side, then the court, the secret court, is coming down against the parents. So we're going to talk a bit more about judges later in the programme, but of course this is yet another example of the soft sell to enable social services to take people's children.
And the other thing that struck me about this story was the similarities, the potential similarities with the Linda Lewis case, because we're talking about here a couple who were wrongly alleged to have given a 12-year-old medicine to reduce symptoms of nervous system, digestive and growth problems. So they were claiming that their son required medication for real physical problems, and social services don't seem to have been prepared to believe that, and seem to have been determined to take the children on the basis of an incorrect diagnosis.
Yeah, well, of course, this is exactly right, because in the Linda Lewis case, where the girl was seriously ill with Zollinger's disease, multiple ulceration of the gut and intense pain, all the mother ever did is try to obtain treatment. She was accused of Munchausen by proxy. Her daughter was taken away, and even though Neath Port Talbot Council subsequently discovered that that diagnosis was absolutely correct and the mother had been trying to treat her daughter and do all the things she should have, that young lady has never been reunited with her mother. And this shows the power of social services now. We effectively have a very, I'm going to use the word dangerous organisation, which is able to take children. It can section people, as we've recently seen with Holly Barker in Oxford. If you stand up to protect your children, you can be sectioned for doing just that. And if the matter ends up in court, we now have judges in secret courts deciding what's going to happen. This is incredibly serious, and there are still so many people in the UK that don't realise what's happening. Yeah. If you do, please pass on the word. It's the only thing that's going to stop it. And things not looking too good in Haiti here.
Right, so this is an article from the Christian Science Monitor from Friday, I think, or well, a couple of days ago anyway, and they're highlighting the fact that, or they're calling it a new phase in Haiti's post-earthquake reconstruction. Of course, we remember the earthquake that hit Haiti and devastated the place a couple of years ago, but we've also had Hurricane Sandy devastating the place yet again. And so Christian Science Monitor is pointing out that the people in Haiti are crowing about the fact that these great new top-class hotels are being built in the centre of Port-au-Prince, but they're not pointing out, and this article does actually hint at this, but they're not pointing out the fact that for the majority of people in Haiti, life is still hell. And so, for example, rather than investing in key infrastructure that might give them some kind of life, like water systems or sewage systems or food production, basic infrastructure, where they're spending the money on these great hotels instead. So to give an impression of the impact of this, the life expectancy of the average male in Haiti at the moment has fallen from 44.9 years to 27.9 years since the earthquake.
Right.
Right.
So as a result of an international aid program, we've actually destroyed the life expectancy.
Absolutely correct. And for females, it's fallen from 46.2 to 37.1 years. And I mean, in the 21st century, for any country to have a population with an average life expectancy of 30 years or so, this is fairly unacceptable. But we're spending the money on top-class hotels for people to go, and I don't know what they go for, but.
Yeah, incredible to look at the respective priorities. And of course, underneath it all, the banking system is absolutely key to every part of trouble in society, whether it's wars or pharmaceutical industry or rebuilding in Haiti.
I thought this was a fascinating headline in the Telegraph from their Debt Crisis Live page. The banking system still not fully prepared for collapse. And what this is highlighting a quote from the a senior European Central Bank official who has said, "The world would be better prepared than before, but not fully prepared. It's positive that banks these days are better capitalised, but it's not enough. We urgently need a legal framework for the closure and settlement of banks." And so he's saying that this legal framework is urgently needed, that we urgently need to be able to prepare for a collapse of the financial system. And I just ask, what does he know? Because what is the urgency? We've been talking about the oncoming collapse for quite some time.
We're talking about the urgency, but maybe finally it's beginning to drift through into the mainstream press. But the thing I always find interesting on this is when we're talking about the bankers, we then talk about Parliament as if it's something separate, and in fact we're just seeing that British politicians are simply puppets of the international banking system.
Indeed. And so in this one, indeed, Parliament is mentioned, and they're talking again about a Glass-Steagall style split of the banking system, and they're talking about enshrining it in some kind of legislation. So the Commission on Banking Standards is looking at the possibility of keeping legislation to split retail and investment banking on the statute books as a nuclear option if ring fencing doesn't work. And as we've discussed many times, the Commission on Banking Standards believes that the idea of a ring fence is the right thing to do. So you don't split the banks up, you just put some kind of governance in place to prevent the retail and the investment sides of the banks talking to each other. And we all know that that isn't going to work. You know, the key point here is that the ring fencing idea would not have prevented the LIBOR scandal. And it's, for me, you know, I don't really care what happens in the investment banking world if some people lose money in that section, in that area. That's up to them if they want to gamble. But it's the effect of LIBOR and other scandals on people in the retail sector, which is the likes of us, and
which impacts on jobs and
impacts on
savings.
Jobs and the real economy.
Yeah.
So ring fencing would not have prevented that. So we should be looking at the more serious choice, which is to split the banks up.
Yeah, and for those of people who are beginning to get interested in where our money comes from and how the banking system works, do have a look at UK Column website and the downloadable ebook on the Bradbury pound, which shows how we could be issuing our own currency as credit and abandoning the debt-based system by which all of the international banking community is making a small fortune.
And of course, the financial crisis is having an impact on the real economy, and particularly on commodity prices. So this is an Australian Government Department of Agriculture, Fisheries and Forestry report, which is, I just wanted to show a quote here indicating that for 2013, world wheat prices are expected to rise by 20% on top of what they are currently. And what I just wanted to put that in a bit of context, because this graph shows historic wheat prices going back to 1987. And as you can see, for most of that time, wheat has been in the range of $130 to $160, and you know, even taking into account inflation over the first 3 quarters of that graph, that you know, wheat prices have stayed reasonably static. And suddenly in 2007, 2008, we had that big spike as a result of the financial collapse. But since then, we've had massive inflation. So that short-term spike in 2007, 2008 disappeared again. And since then, we've had a steady upward trend. And it's not going to change because obviously this year and for the last couple of years, we're having reducing yields. But it's not just wheat and other sort of grains which are the problem. Here we've got a report from meatpoultry.com describing that they are expecting to see a similar rise in the price of beef and probably other meats as well. So you know, I think this needs to be seen in the context of the comments from Mark Carney, who's going to be the new Bank of England governor, that he made last week regarding whether or not inflation should be a target for the Bank of England in the future. And it's clear that he feels the need to remove the requirement to keep inflation at 2%. And I think this is giving an indication as to why he clearly sees that inflation is going to be an upwardly moving object in the next couple of years, and he doesn't want to have to try and keep it at that 2% rate.
And perhaps we should say here, for people who are new to UK Column Live, or perhaps you've only just joined us that what we are doing is trying to expose what is really happening. We're not just reporting these subjects in order to give people bad news. What we're doing is saying that these are problems and crises which are being driven, deliberately driven by the international banking community, hand in glove with the political circles. These people know what they're doing.
Absolutely, deliberately driven and easily fixable. But we've got to understand the problems.
Yeah, understand the problem first, and then we can start to look at how we deal with it. But the key is taking control of the international banks.
And you know, this is a key example of a problem which is easily fixable. Whenever the utilities were sold off by Margaret Thatcher, they basically give utility companies the right to take huge amounts of profit. And in the last 30 years, they've taken those profits but have invested nothing in the infrastructure, so the infrastructure has collapsed. And now we're talking about suddenly starting some major projects to improve the UK's gas and electricity networks. But of course, they won't be using those historic profits in order to pay for that. They're going to be sticking an extra 12 quid on our bills over the next 8 years. Yeah. And this is fully supported by the regulator, the Quango, that the government has established in order to regulate, in inverted commas, the industry. It's a disgrace. These companies have taken huge amount of profit in the last number of years and have deliberately underinvested in the infrastructure. The infrastructure is collapsing, and so they then stick more money on our bills.
Well, I'm going to say it's not only disgraceful, but what we're actually looking at is theft, in that we've got the nation's assets, public infrastructure, which has been stolen by private institutions, and we're now expected to pay for it again. So this is blatant fraud and corruption by the British government, which of course is now really beginning to impact on ordinary people. Food prices go up, energy prices go up, and rates of pay and job availability come down. So this is not accidental. This is not something that we have to suffer in Britain. And if we take a leaf out of little Iceland, we could start to solve this problem tomorrow by simply cutting off the corrupt international banking cartels that are driving this lot. Yep. I think for 2013 we can say that we are going to harden up on looking at what the solutions are and what ordinary people need to do if they're going to put a stop to this, but it can be stopped. You've got a bit on here on mothers, which is a very topical issue.
Well, I wasn't hugely impressed with most of the reporting of the census statistics, but this one did grab my eye because I just feel that it's hugely important in the first few years of a child's life to have the mother with the child. And looking back on when my children were particularly young and I was working, you know, all kinds of hours, the relationship with my children was not there at that time, and it was only after I left that particular job and was working less hours that relationship started to grow properly. And how does any family expect to be a solid unit yeah. When there is no bond made between the mother and the child as a result of pressure to go out to work?
Well, I think that the government happens to be this government, the Lib Dem Tory government, but I think they'll be absolutely crowing over these figures, because essentially I believe what they wanted is to be able to get hold of children and get children into the system as soon as possible. So if you look at the way that academy schools have been pushed through and you read material around academy schools, you're not just looking at those academy schools for older children, you're looking at an educational agenda, political agenda, which wants children from the earliest age. So the moment they can be pushed off to a carer or a childminder, the state knows that it can start to get its own educational agenda in. So I believe that there are going to be many people who are absolutely being crowing with delight. And of course, as we see the economic situation getting worse, more families are going to have both parents working as breadwinners. Well, so the state ultimately claims the children.
salaries are falling, full-time jobs are disappearing, being replaced with part-time jobs. People are going to have to work multiple jobs with more hours. You're absolutely bang on with that.
Yeah, so it's very much a personal thing, isn't it? But bear in mind that the government has another plan for our children than the one we may think, and that is that the children belong to the state. This was an interesting little article on Andrew Mitchell, which popped up in the Guardian, and the essence of the story is that the constable from the Specialist Met Police Unit that actually leaked information against the so-called Plebgate row, which is where this gentleman used foul language against the police. But now we've got the police officer who's been picked up for leaking the information. So as usual, the political figure goes scot-free, but now we've got the policeman who actually made the issue public. And I would say that the public needed to know, because we need to know just what the state of our politicians is. But that policeman's picked up.
Yeah.
Where do you think this is taking us?
Well, it's clear from the article that they intend that this is seen as the first sort of effective leveson, as they tend to break up any kind of relationship between journalists and the police. So where's it taking us? It's taking us to a world where anything can happen within the police, and whistleblowers are actively discouraged.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, we'll follow on from that, because a little article, we picked this up from the Mail. I think it was on page 2, and it wasn't a huge article. But basically, what we're now seeing is that Leveson is saying that basically he doesn't necessarily want to appear in front of a Commons committee to explain the details of his new proposed regulations to curb the press. And it's possible that he either wouldn't appear or he appears in secret. But there was a comment made by a senior legal source, which is quoted in the paper. I'll just bring it up here. The senior legal source said that the Lord Chief Justice, Lord Judge, and Lord Leveson are perfectly entitled to tell the MPs to get lost. Leveson conducted a judicial inquiry and does not have to answer to MPs or anyone else for it. Now, this to us seems to be a very telling and quite incredible statement, because what we have now is the judges in UK saying that they are absolutely above the law. They're not answerable to supposedly democratically elected MPs, and therefore they're not answerable to the people. So if we combine this with the fact we've now got judges saying that they can do what they like in secret courts, as with the family cases, we've got judges operating in those and in other circumstances with no jury. We've got Ken Clarke calling for yet more secretive courts. And now we've got this arrogance around the control of the press. This is leading us into a very dark, dangerous place where it appears that the judges in Britain think that they run the country, when of course it's the ordinary person that's actually sovereign, and law is made by the decision of juries, not by the decision of judges. That is presumably why the judges are desperate to stamp out juries of our peers from courts. So we thought we'd have a little look into this and what's been going on. But the first place we wanted to focus on was Lord Judge himself. And this was a Telegraph article from a little while ago, when basically he got involved in the appeal for a woman who was raped by her husband, but then jailed for falsely retracting the allegation. And I think she was sentenced originally to 8 months in prison. So she was raped repeatedly, vicious sexual attacks. But when she got scared and was being intimidated by the husband's family, she eventually retracted her statement. She did spend time in prison. But if we look at what the learned Lord Judge had to say at the time, it's in this text here. So it was Judge John Rogers who found her guilty at Mould Crown Court originally and sentenced her to 8 months. Campaigners spoke out. And then the key bit is that last Tuesday, the Lord Chief Justice, Lord Judge, ordered her release. Describing her case as exceptional, he ruled that a community punishment and a 2-year suspended sentence would be more appropriate. So here we have the true style of judges, that essentially a woman who has been nothing but a victim, and a very frightened one at that, according to Lord Judge, is still going to be penalised because of her actions. So clearly there's no common sense, there's no compassion, there's no morality. This is an interesting insight into the mind of Lord Judge, who's a man who now thinks he and his team are above the law and should be controlling the press. We then had a little look through judicial inquiries, and even the BBC, this is going back to 2003, was pointing out that judicial inquiries can often be extremely weak, and in fact they're saying here they have been criticised as the weakest form of inquiry which a government can establish. That seems to be fit into the picture quite nicely with Blair, Brown and David Cameron. But if we then start to have a look in a little more detail about the Inquiries Act 2005, a little bit difficult to see on the slide, but essentially when an inquiry is called, if a judge or another member of the judiciary is to be called, there are 2 lists here, the description of the judge and the person to be consulted. What we find is that if a judge is to be used of any rank or status, then of course the judiciary have to be consulted. So far from being independent, what we see is the judiciary controlling their own under the Act. And then if we start to have a look into the Judicial Appointments Commission for the mysteries of how judges are actually appointed, we're told that it's a committee with an independent lay chair. But of course, if you look through the committee members, they are overwhelmingly from the judiciary. Admittedly, there's the odd solicitor, but effectively they're all legal people themselves. So what we are seeing are the judiciary setting themselves up to be above the law. And the last slide here is actually saying that if a vacancy arises, the Lord Chancellor must consult the Lord Chief Justice before making a request to commission to convene a panel to make a selection of judges. Now, the UK column for quite some time has had a number of barristers who've been happy to speak to us off the record, and they are warning as to what they see is of a hidden mafia by which judges are appointed. So we've got barristers themselves saying, we really don't know how this system works and how these judges are being brought forward. It's quite a worrying state of affairs. We're seeing quite a lot of criticism at the moment to do with the internet and pornography. This is the Telegraph coming up, and it's being critical in that it's saying that ministers are prioritising web giants over children in the online porn row. And this is because all of a sudden a report has come out of the Department of Education which says that we don't need automatic blocks on online porn. So we thought we'd have a look through this in a little bit more detail. And of course, one of the early names that comes up is Harriet Harman, Deputy Leader of the Labour Party, who's been saying ministers had caved into pressure from internet giants and put their interests ahead of child protection. Now, of course, Harriet Harman is an extremely interesting lady because a little while ago it was revealed that she'd got a rather checkered background, but she's been speaking out very strongly. So here she is criticising, essentially criticising parents who let their children watch pornography while they watch Downton Abbey. This is the telling article from the Telegraph, and in this one it's pointing out that Harriet Harman, of course, was I'll just call up the text here, was calling on ministers to make sexually explicit photographs or films of children legal unless there was evidence that the subject, the child, had been harmed. At the time she made the official submission, she was a senior figure in a civil liberties organisation that is Liberty, that wanted the age of consent to be lowered to 14 and incest decriminalised. It also defended self-confessed paedophiles in the press and allowed them to attend its meetings. So for sheer hypocrisy, this woman is standing up at the moment and saying, oh, we've got to protect children, but her history is of somebody who's been involved in organisations which are clearly putting children at risk.
So she's upset that children are looking at pornographic images on the internet, but she's quite happy for children to take part in making pornographic images.
Yeah, she's supporting, or was supporting, the people who are actually making the pornographic images. And remember, this lady is deputy leader of the Labour Party. So if there are any viewers out there who are old-style Labour, please have a think about the people that are really in power at the moment as your representative. And of course, Google is part of this. This article here from the Mail is talking about outrage after Google tweaks image search results to make porn harder to find in the US. Well, I know this article is to do with the US, but apparently Google is crowing that they've made it more difficult to find porn. So we tried a simple experiment today, and we put the word sex into Google search, and very quickly up comes the normal selection of online pornography.
But of course those links that you've got ringed there, those are all paid for links. So Google is making a fortune out of advertising pornography.
Well, we're going to come on to that subject, but we thought we'd go to it by coming through the politicians who, of course, are the key problem at the moment. And here we've got a very young David Cameron on board an aircraft, and he's with his closest advisor, Steve Hilton. Well, people may have forgotten that Mr. Hilton is married to Rachel Whetstone, the high-powered communication chief for Google. They have 2 children, but they're godparents to David Cameron's late eldest son, Ivan. Not only that, but if we look into Miss Whetstone a little bit with a bit more detail, we also find, of course, that she was chief of staff to Tory leader Michael Howard. So here we've got this interwoven connection between Google and the people in Parliament who are supposedly making decisions on our behalf.
So Google, the biggest snooping organisation on the planet, is directly tied to the Conservative Party, which is controlling the legislation which may surround pornography on the internet and one of Google's major sources of income.
Well, if we remember in the national press, Google, as a multi-billion-dollar company, said it was unable to tell how much money it made from pornography, which I thought was an unbelievably disingenuous statement, a lie. Because if they don't know how much money they're making for one sector of the internet, I fail to see how they can run as a business.
Maybe this is why Cameron doesn't want to take any tax from them, because he doesn't know where the money's come from.
Well, we'll come back on the point that if Cameron can use his judge friends to actually start to control the press and media, if we can stop policemen from releasing details of crime, which must be in the public interest, we're well on our way to the police state.
Yeah.
How are we going to stop it? We're going to tell the truth wherever possible, and we're going to ask viewers and listeners to visit other sites doing the same. But let's get the lid off and expose what these people are doing. So I think we're going to end there today.
Are we making an announcement about Christmas?
What, end of the world may prevent it?
No, well, our final broadcast of 2012 is going to be on Friday.
Yeah.
And we'll be back on Monday the 7th of January, and at a new time, 1 p.m.
At 1 p.m. And we'll also say that we're considering some evening programmes, because we've had a lot of inquiries from people who of course find it difficult to watch during the working day. So the focus in 2013 is going to be on solutions, but the first part of any solution is to understand what's actually being done to you, your family, and to our society and country. So please keep watching. Okay, thank you. Bye.
Bye. Bye.